Last week, Lauren did a great job of laying out a game plan for the upcoming PPMS meeting. She clearly identified that the topic was metrics that matter and that our focus would be on the plants, as our motto indicates. At the meeting, we'll get an education on metrics that matter. And to prepare us all for the upcoming meeting, there's three things that she's laid out to get us prepared. One of the mini talks, of which this is one of them. There's a playbook installment which Jeremy puts together and sends out each week. It's great. It has articles to read, videos to watch, to get us thinking about metrics. And then there's an assignment that will be coming out shortly, which hopefully you're looking forward to. Then at the meeting we'll have meeting breakouts. So with that, let me get started. I've read numerous articles. I've seen lots of videos in preparation for this assignment, and after going through that process, several things have boiled to the top. And in the next 3 slides, I've tried to capture those items, and so my intent was to just flip through those 3 pages, spend about 5 seconds on each one. I'm not going to say anything, just see what thoughts get generated in your mind, and then I'll go into a little detail on the back end. So after reading and looking and researching this topic, I really got confused through the process about what the order of things. Did goals come first? Strategy come first? Do metrics drive the strategy? Do strategy drive the metrics? I was thinking behavior was driven by strategy, which then metrics measured behavior. But maybe metrics drive behavior. How does it work? But through that process, what I came to realize is that it's not so much, which came first, but it all is intertwined. And what's really critical is that the thinking continues. The way I view PPMS and where we're at is that we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of experience, and I think the challenge for us is to continue thinking. To encourage critical thinking, we have to ask good questions that make you think about the answer, think about the consequences of what you're talking about. In regards to metrics, what are the consequences of the metrics that we're looking at? Through the process, we should get clarity and consensus from the team on what the metrics that matter are. When we ask questions, they need to be pointing us back towards the goal and the strategy. In other words, if somebody wants to put a liner in a wastewater pond, we need to ask the question, how does it relate back to the goals? If we think another metric is important, then we need to be pointing that metric back to how it impacts the goals. Other questions that we need to force ourselves to ask should challenge our inherited knowledge. And what by that I just mean that, let me give an example. When I first started, I was sitting in a budget review meeting, and the question was asked, do you make money on Steam? And at first the question was yes. Then after further probing, the answer was no. And then it was yes. And then it was, well, that's what I've been told. And while that's not meant to be a criticism, it just highlights that we need to be in a position to know. We need to understand and know and question our inherited knowledge. Along those lines, it's the question of, not so much what are our metrics, but why are those your metrics? And we need to be able to answer that question. Now, going back to this cycle that I got in, what I did glean from thinking about this was that you get in the cycle, you're learning, you're measuring, you're behaving, you're setting goal strategies, blah, blah, blah. You're thinking, and you're fine-tuning what those goals and strategies should be. Through that process, what pops out are metrics that matter most. Heaven forbid we have plenty of metrics. We can just turn to our management reports to see all the metrics that are out there. So here's a small sample of metrics that are found in our monthly management report. And notice this is not a comprehensive list of what's in there. You'll notice that there aren't even any financial measures such as price per megawatt or price per MMBTU and those type of things. It's just to highlight all the metrics, a sample of what the metrics are that are out there. So the question is what do you look at and why? And I want you to just kind of look at that list and ask yourself, what are you looking at? In one of the articles in the playbook, actually it's a video, they talk about if your strategy has 3 objectives, you're most likely to be successful at those three objectives. If you have 4 to 10 objectives, you're most likely to be successful at 1 or 2 of those. If you have more than 10 objectives, then you're most likely not going to be successful at all. As I look back over my career and things that I've learned and heard and been taught, I think about things like, keep it simple. I hear stories about strategic manuals that are so thick that nobody knows really what the strategy is. So I think that's the message here, is that we need to condense it down and really identify where our focus needs to be, and be willing to cut out things that aren't things that matter the most, so that we don't get distracted. So the challenge is to take your monthly management report or whatever report you use to identify metrics, and identify 3 that you think are most impactful to the goal and the strategy. And then I want you to test yourself. Did you pick the right 3? And the way you'll be able to tell if you picked the right 3 is by first determining how much influence you have on that metrics. So in other words, if you pick ambient temperature as your metric, how influential can you be on that metric? If you have influence on that metric, then the question is how much does your influence impact accomplishing the goal? Going through that process, you'll be able to identify if you pick the right 3 or not. As a very simple illustration, let's assume your goal is to increase distributions by $1,000 over a 12-month period. So with that as your goal, what's the strategy? How are you going to accomplish that? Is it through reducing costs, through heat rate reduction? So you ask yourself the question, can you influence heat rate? Well, yeah, I guess you can. There's ways, maybe through maintenance, maybe through getting better coal quality, or other ways to do it. But then you really got to ask yourself the question, does that really help me accomplish my goal? In other words, let's say that your revenue is driven by fuel costs. So in other words, fuel costs are a straight pass-through on the revenue side. You could end up spending 3 months reducing your heat rate, only to find out that you didn't increase distributions at all because your revenue was impacted in a correlation with the reduction in your fuel cost. Or maybe you'll find out that the heat rate reduction did work and it wasn't directly correlated to revenue, but it had such a small impact that it really is not a driver. So then what is the strategy? Is it to look at maintenance dollars per megawatt? Again, how much can you influence this? Can you influence it by renegotiating contracts, pushing out outages? There's ways to reduce that. But again, do you get to the end goal of getting to your distributions? Other things might be looking at refinancing your debt, finding a new revenue stream, looking at metrics around number of starts and reducing the starts. These might all be the right answer. They might be all ways of helping to increase distributions by $1,000, but we want to identify the ones that are most impactful. And to get to the answers to these questions, you use your metrics to get there. That will help define your strategy. And then to accomplish the strategy or to work the strategy, you then use those metrics to track your progress. But you let the other metrics go. And that's an important part here. You got to let the other ones go, because if you focus on all of them, then you end up focusing on none of them, or potentially focusing on none of them. I focused a lot in this on financial metrics, but there are metrics around other things. You think about the 8 no's. They all have metrics around them. Know your contracts, know your employees. Safety is certainly paramount in our business, and so metrics around those areas are equally as important. And as we look at metrics that matter, they need to be focused on those areas as well. So this is suggested takeaways from this presentation. What I was hoping you'd do is one, challenge yourself to think. Don't just rely on inherited knowledge or what you think or what you assume. Challenge yourself to really think. And one way to do that is by identifying 3 of the metrics that you think matter the most, and then test it. See how much influence you have on that metric, and see how much your influence can drive towards accomplishing the goals. Hopefully this has been helpful and helps get you better prepared for the PPMS meeting coming up in June.